Thank you for joining me today. Hi, it's Ramsey Bergeron. Welcome to Monday's Musings. And today I want to talk about a quote from Mahatma Gandhi that I feel really resonated with me. I heard it yesterday, but it really speaks true to what I'm trying to do and an important message that I try to relay to my clients. And the quote from Gandhi is he says that his life is his message. Like, my life is my message, is essentially what he said. And that's what I'm using for today's theme is your life is your message. And what does that mean? Whenever I do my presentations or work with clients and I talk about the difference between anabolic and catabolic energy, or how are we showing up, or how our actions have consequences and how we are defined by our actions. It's so funny because usually people will think of someone else in their life that applies to. Like, man, I wish my spouse would hear this, or I wish my boss would hear this. Seldom do we immediately internalize that and realize that it applies to all of us. And the difference that we may want to make in the world starts with us. Like, am I being congruent? And when we say that my life is my message, okay, what does that mean? Are my values, beliefs, and principles in alignment? Because that's do those show up in my actions? Because my actions are the only thing really that determines my life. And are my actions in line with who I think that I am, who I want to be, and the values that I want to live by? And by understanding the impact that we have on others, understanding that my life is my message, how does my life impact other people around me? How does my life impact anyone, from my animals to my coworkers to my community to my family to the world? You know, actions really truly do speak louder than words. And our lives are the most powerful and potent message that we can give. How are we living it? What actions do I take? You know, what are your actions? When you think about who you are, what are your actions? Is that your message to the world? Do you want, well, I mean, it is your message to the world. Do you want that to be your message to the world? Because it's less about what you want to do and more about what are you doing? You know, in the past, I've used the analogy of 10 birds on a wire. So I tell my clients 10 birds are on a wire and 5 decide to fly away. How many are left on the wire? They say, well, 5. It's like, no, there's 10. Just because 5 decided to fly away doesn't mean they did anything. So what are you doing? You know, when you're living your life as your message, are you living it in control or out of control? And that doesn't mean, when I say out of control, that you're just running around raging, which you might be running around raging, drinking, and just having excess and everything. But out of control means you're not consciously deciding how you want to show up every day. You're not creating space between stimulus and reaction to say, okay, this is what I want to do. And that's such a powerful thing to do. And that's what I'm working on with my class right now in Living with Purpose, is creating space between thought and you, because you are not your thought. You are the thinker. You're not even the thinker, you're the observer. My uh, landscapers are here, so my dog's going to be barking. So that's part of the joys of a live broadcast. So creating space between thought and reaction. Like, okay, you have a thought enter your head. That doesn't mean you have to just go on the first thought that comes in, because your thoughts can be and usually are lying to you. So how do you create that space to determine how you want to show up in the world? How do you make your life the message? By finding out, what are your values? Getting in touch, asking yourself, what are your values? And that's an exercise we'll talk about here in a little bit with more solutions. But we need to close the gap between intention and action. Like, we may want to be good people. Okay. You may want to be a good parent. Well, what does that mean to you? What does wanting to be a good parent mean to you? What actions are you taking to be a good parent? If someone were to view your actions and say, all right, well, you know, you did this, you're telling your kids to shut up, you're not allowing them to grow or learn. Is that being a good parent? And I think a key here to avoid shaming yourself, because shaming yourself doesn't do anything. If you're analyzing your actions, if you're saying, I want to start a business, well, that's your intention. What are your actions? You know, you can beat yourself up for saying, oh, I didn't do it sooner. That doesn't get us anywhere. So just having the awareness of what are the facts versus what's the story I'm telling myself. And a saying that I like to tell my clients is shed your shame and stake your claim. Meaning like, okay, that action wasn't in line with who I want to be. Who do I want to be? I'm going to stake my claim to that. Shed your shame and stake your claim. Okay. The past is the past. I don't want to be that person anymore. Well, who do I want to be? What do I want my message to be? The hardest tightrope we will ever walk is the one between accountability and grace. So trying to hold yourself accountable while also allowing yourself to be human. Because in the past, I used to have one extreme or the other. I used to either hold myself accountable and shame myself if I didn't do it perfectly, or I would say, well, I'm human, I'm making mistakes, just using that to justify poor behavior or poor choices, as opposed to learning and growing. So if you truly want your life to be your message, then you got to walk that tightrope. How are you holding yourself accountable to move forward while still allowing yourself some grace to be human? Another thing to consider is when you're deciding what you want to do and who you want to be, not allowing your victim story to dictate your actions when you say your life is your message. So I've worked with clients before who've had pretty bad childhoods, or who've had really been screwed over in business, really been screwed over in relationships. And sometimes we can use that as the justification for why we're not moving forward. And all that does is limit us. It limits our choices. It limits our ability to find solutions. I have never told this story outside of a workshop. I've never told this story live. I've never told this story on any form of social media. But when I was 5 years old, one of the only memories I have of my father, he was a diplomat with the United Nations and had diplomatic immunity all over the world. And we were in, I believe it was Jordan. And he had dignitaries over to the house. And he asked me to get him I guess I had to be younger than 5 because we've moved to the States when I was 5. I was 3 or maybe 3 or 4 years old. And he asked me to get him a Diet Coke. And I accidentally brought him a Coke. And he proceeded to pour it down my pants in front of the people that we had at the house, in front of his guests. And I still remember that. I still remember being traumatized by that. And that was just one incident that I didn't black out from my childhood of what a very abusive father. And I'm sharing that with you because it could be very easy for me to say that, well, I have these issues because of my childhood, or I'm going to rage the world because of how I was brought up. That justifies me having bad behavior as an adult. Well, I want to clarify that there is no book for parenting. There's no book for raising children. My father had his own demons. He had his own unresolved trauma that he never worked through. But that doesn't mean that I can use what happened to me as justification to not be the best version of myself. Because at the end of the day, my life is still my message. And what do I want it to look like? If I have this victim mentality of I'm a victim, then I can't grow. There's a difference between being victimized and having a victim mentality. So I was very much victimized, but my message is one of resilience. It's one of, okay, that happened. Yes. What do I choose to do with that? How do I choose to take from that and move forward and create my story and do what I can to make sure that I don't cause harm to other people the way that harm was caused to me? So what are you doing to work through these issues from your past? Because your life, at the end of your life, either way, they're going to write something about you. People are going to say, here was so-and-so. Your life is your message. And what are the common things that keep us from making the message what we want? The largest is fear. We're scared of the unknown. We're scared of change, which that's what my whole class is about this week in Living with Purpose. We're just scared. We want what's comfortable. We want what's familiar, even if it's not functional, because it's what we know. Which is why so many of us, when we have challenging relationships around us when we're young, we tend to recreate those when we're older because it's what we know. Chaos becomes familiar. So what are you doing to break that pattern? What are you doing to make your life, your message, not based on the actions of people 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that didn't have a booklet on how to raise people? It's up to you now. And thinking about when your life is your message, it starts with gratitude. And I know that sounds so cliche and silly, but think about it this way. Whenever I do an experiment in class where I show people a picture, and it's one of those intentional misdirection things where, have you done the experiment where, all right, look around the room, see everything that's black. Now close your eyes. Okay, now what's red? And you can't think of anything red because you weren't looking for it. And it's just an example of you see what you look for. And then it gets reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. So when I get a new car, I start seeing that new car everywhere. And it's not that everyone went out and started buying Nissan Rogues. It's just I'm more aware of that now. So when I'm creating my life as my message, if I'm used to my whole life looking for negatives, if that's what I'm looking for is always being let down, never being able to count on anybody, I'm going to see that because that's what I'm looking for. And in doing that, I'm not seeing the people around who are willing to help me, the people around me who can support me, the opportunities that are right in front of me. And so what happens is it starts becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy because where my attention goes, my energy flows. So like right now, if I were to ask you, hey, think about your left foot. Is your left foot in a sock? Is it in a shoe? Are you on the floor? Before I mentioned your left foot, you probably weren't thinking about it at all. But now that I've brought it up, you have full awareness of your left foot. And that's what our brain does. Our brain filters out what's important, what's not important. So to live your life, to have an abundant mindset, to be able to help yourself and other people, you have to select what you're focusing on. The same way I just mentioned your foot, you started thinking about your foot. So that's why I encourage all of you to, I guess let's focus the solutions, I guess. So we'll talk about the ways to begin to make your life your legacy. The first one is selective watering of what's important to you. You know, it's like what seeds grow are the ones you water. So if you're always thinking about negativity, if you're always focused on what could go wrong, you're going to see more of that. And then you're creating your life around you. You're creating a negative life full of chaos. But if you start being intentional with gratitude, so every morning when you wake up, write down 3 things you're grateful for. It is amazing how helpful that is to just shift to begin to notice more things that are around you that you can be grateful for. Separate fact from judgment. Whenever you're telling yourself a story like, oh, I hate my job, do you really hate your job? Or do you just not like the commute? Because once you start telling yourself a story, you make that your reality. And do this without judgment. So if you're telling the story that I'm a great business partner, but you don't ever communicate with the other business partners, you're trying to do, and first off, I'm just talking hypotheticals. There's nothing that's happened to me in my life. This isn't projection. So just sharing some things that may be happening for you in your life. Like ask yourself, are my actions really in line with this? What are the facts versus what's the story I'm telling myself? And if it's incongruent, okay, take a step back. Don't shame yourself. Again, shed your shame, stake your claim. Who do you want to be? How do you get there? What's your game plan? And that's one of the most challenging things that you can do with your life is determine, all right, who the hell am I and what do I want my message to be? And that's really what, by teaching the class I'm teaching right now, the Living with Purpose, it's really forced me to really be more analytical about my choices. And creating that space between, like, I'll have a thought come into my head. I spent some time last week with someone, and it can be really challenging when someone has some trauma in their life, and then they tend to be a little bit more reactionary. Well, I can be reactionary also. When you have 2 reactionary people, it tends to not work well. So being able to take that step between when there's an action, I don't have to take it personally because anything anyone else does has nothing to do with me. So my message can only be clear if I can take space between what's happened and how I'm going to choose to respond. So how are you choosing to respond? How are you choosing to respond to the things around you, to the situation you're in? Are you viewing it with anger or rage because it's not what you wanted? Because it's not, quote unquote, how it should have gone? Or do you view life with curiosity? Like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why that's the way it is. Okay. Well, I want to learn about that. Or this is what I want for myself. How do I get there? This is what I want for my community. How can I contribute to that? Slow down. Thank you so much for listening. There is still room if you wanted to take my Living with Purpose class. You can join it. It's a 12-week program. You can join anytime. You can get caught up. Right now, we're starting week 3 or 4 this week, and it has been fantastic. So I really appreciate all of you. Thank you for listening. Share in the comments below. What is your biggest takeaway from this recording today? I really appreciate you, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.